Okay, hi, Mr. Rahul Desai. Welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot. Good to be here.
Oh yeah, thanks for being here. I actually am a fan of your writing. Like the way I discovered you was on Twitter. Like I was following someone else and he liked your tweet, and I saw that you reviewed some film which I had
Hmm.
liked, and you had bashed the film.
Okay.
And I remember tweeting to you like, why you gotta be so negative, man? Like even I do movie reviews, and
Ah,
I thought it was good. And you had replied like, if you review movies, you might know that everyone has a different point of view. And then I thought, okay, that's a valid argument.
yeah.
And then I read your reviews and I liked it very much. But then
Hmm.
I saw that you like Michael Scott and you wrote an article about him.
Yeah, I did.
And then I thought like, okay, that's great. Okay, I like his work now.
Yeah, I mean, not a lot of people agree with reviewers' opinions and all, but it's always nice when we have some similar taste somewhere.
Yeah, but I want to ask, how much hate do you get? Like I understood,
Hmm.
but I'm guessing some people might not.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, all of us do get a lot of hate. Even I do, but the sign is like the more hate you get, the more popular you're getting technically, right? Because more
Right.
people are reading you, more people are understanding who you are. So, I mean, it's not abnormal. I ignore most of it, but I just hope people. I've noticed that over the last year or couple of years, my sort of reader base has started understanding that you don't always have to agree with the reviewer about the opinion, but if you agree with the way he or she is writing, or if the writing can sort of speak to you, then that's your job done as a critic. So I guess
Right.
it's not too much about, and I keep repeating myself about the opinion thing because it is important for even professionals like all of us to understand that, because we tend to dismiss other reviewers ourselves sometimes thinking, अरे इसको अच्छी नहीं लगी ये film, बकवास reviewer है. It's not like, then you have to, if someone doesn't agree with you, read the review and then see if they are making sense from their own perspective. So I think readers have started to understand that, so the hate has decreased over the last year or so.
That's good. You also started doing videos, right? Like I saw your Arya review.
Yeah, so I mean, it's audio. It's as far as I
Yeah.
can go right now because I'm not very comfortable with video, and I'm really like a hardcore writer. So, and the whole point about writing is people write because they're not comfortable like in person. So for me, video is a very difficult thing to do. Hats off to people who do it, but I can't. So I just did an audio thing because it helps the channel, if anything.
But you anyways do the retake.
Yeah, that's a conversation. So as long as I don't have to talk directly to the camera and not
Alright.
review, I can have conversations with people. I'm very comfortable doing that as long as there's a person I'm talking to.
Talking to, yes. Right. But also on the topic of this,
Hmm.
like as politically incorrect that show was,
Hmm.
you think it can get a revival? Like Steve Carell definitely doesn't agree. But do you think it can get a revival like Parks and Rec, but a good one?
I mean, I'm not sure, man. Like, I don't think it should get a revival because, a show like The Office grows in our memory and becomes like acquires a certain status in our head also because it's not available to sort of watch live anymore. Like, we aren't anticipating new seasons. So we keep revisiting the old parts and actually now admiring Office far more than we used to while it was going on. That's what even I've
Definitely.
noticed. That's the beauty of good shows. So I feel like shows that have sort of run its course. I think nostalgia is a great prism to look at them through. I don't think a character like Michael Scott can ever be written again.
Yeah.
I don't think people should aspire to that either because a lot. I think Steve Carell himself worked very hard to get out of that persona to be taken seriously as an actor in cinema also. So I think there won't be a revival. There have been remakes everywhere in almost a lot of countries. I don't
Yeah.
know about the success of these remakes or anything, but for me, the American Office is the Office. I know the people are very gung-ho about the British Office, but it only ran for one season, so it wasn't really tested. It was great in that first season, but the endurance wasn't tested. And Office America got better with time, and as as we all know, Michael Scott has become like a definitive TV character of the
Yeah.
generation.
one of the best characters there is that, definitely.
For sure.
So you know, on this thing, what do you think of Space Force?
Yeah, I mean, I went in with a lot of expectation, and I know, I mean, I had to review it. Obviously, it was my job and all, and it sort of, I was underwhelmed by it. It wasn't because I expected it to be a Steve Carell show. It was just because I think they were trying to do a lot of different stuff. If you remember, Office season 1 was a pretty underwhelming too. You know, a lot of people didn't know how to.
React to
How
it.
to accept it, because a workspace comedy is a very specific genre of TV comedy, and we look at it as a very old-fashioned, old school. Nothing is happening. That's why it's funny kind of comedy. So I guess this was try to sort of actually make it into a physical genre by giving us like something to actually laugh about, because as we know, Space Force is actually a real thing that Trump came up with. So
Yeah.
I get the whole in joke thing, but I also believe that it might. I hope it gets a season extension, because I believe it's going somewhere. I just felt like there was too much disparity between the dramatic parts, which was his daughter, parts with his daughter, and the workspace part. So I think they might just find a balance in the second season. Of course, I was all for Steve Carell playing the general, and I think he did a great job, and so did John Malkovich. John Malkovich was my favorite part of the series, actually.
Same thing.
He isn't tapped. His comedy skills aren't tapped enough, because he has this very poker face way of doing it, like most serious actors do, actually.
Right.
So I think it was heading somewhere. I just was disappointed with the way it ended. The final episode was a mess. So I thought maybe give it another chance, maybe next season. But I am still looking forward to it, because I know my opinion was slightly controversial, because everyone sort of associates me with being a big Office fan and a big Steve Carell fan. But
Right.
With great pressure comes great expectations also. So
Yes. I mean, same thing. Like I wanted Lisa Kudrow's reason to at least be revealed.
Yeah, exactly.
Why was she
I
in it?
think that was pretty random. I mean, I get it. Like, you want us to sort of just accept it, but nothing was revealed. And in the end, you sort of are telling us that, okay, it's going to be one crazy Modern Family kind of setup over the second season, while some shit is going down in space, which is fine, which is a nice setup. But then the whole first season felt like a setup.
Right. Yeah. It was the setup for the next upcoming seasons.
Yeah.
But it's again a Netflix, right? So you don't know it's going to get renewed or not.
Yeah, it's tricky, man. Netflix can be pretty ruthless. So I don't know, but I do believe Space Force was quite widely viewed. So
Definitely.
the reviews were hot and cold, but I think going on numbers only, I think it should be renewed, hopefully, because I'm all for Steve Carell continuing his comedy career, because
Definitely.
the first time we saw him in a TV comedy since The Office, it's been a while. His movies
And also
are
Greg Daniels coming together.
Sorry, what?
Also Greg Daniels and Steve Carell coming together.
Greg Daniels and Steve Carell repeating the whole thing, and Greg Daniels has been on a roll lately, so I was happy to see that they are still keeping this very old school genre of comedy alive. So and they now do have like the resources, unlike Office, which was shot entirely in one set most of the time. Now they have the budget, they have the resources. So I guess you get greedy doing that, and you can go a little ori in the narrative. But let's see. I hope Steve Carell, because I love him as a dramatic actor. I think I'm a big fan of him. As I think almost every dramatic role he does, there's so much to learn from. And in the last 5 or 6 years, the way he's aged, and the way he started playing these roles of a father, or even experimenting with negative roles, even in series and all, I think
Mark Baum.
Yeah, exactly. And I think he's a great actor in general. I just hope he doesn't get too obsessed with like Space Force only, or like cinema only.
Yeah, let's hope not. Hi.
Hey, hi, Keval.
Thank you so much for doing this again. I'm genuinely sorry for last time.
Yeah, it happens. It's happened to me also before. It's fine.
Oh, great. Okay, so last time we discussed We discussed too many things, but the podcast had come in Office and Space Force only.
Okay.
So, but
Right.
after which I wanted to ask you,
Huh.
I'm sorry if I'll repeat some questions though.
No, absolutely, it's fine.
But the thing was, have you ever thought of writing a film or directing a film yourself? Like, why did you think of just reviewing rather than make it?
I started off when I did after my college, I did a short filmmaking course at Xavier's Institute of Communications for a
Right.
year. And back then, my aim was to become a writer. I just didn't know what kind of writer I wanted to be. At that point, I had a great interest in films. I was always heavily influenced by movies throughout my life. So I wanted to, at best become a screenwriter. Maybe not a director or anything. I had that at that point. I thought writing, the only best kind of writing one can do is screenwriting or writing movies. It sounded great. So that's
Right.
that's why I did the course, and I knew that I had a flair for writing. So maybe I'll figure it out by the end of the course that if it's for me or not. For a couple of years after that, I actually assisted a few documentary filmmakers, a few small time filmmakers, because that helped me get closer to the craft of of every
Filmmaking.
particular facet of filmmaking. Because productions, you don't get to see each and every aspect, and you're limited to a particular role. So I did that for a couple of years, but then obviously as time was passing, and back then the scene was a little different, because technology wasn't what it is right now. Social media wasn't a big deal, so it was harder to get work also back then. And living in Bombay, I had to figure out to pay bills, and it's not it's not a cheap place to live in. So so on the side, that's when on the side I started watching films and reviewing films for a friend's blog, and that's when I realized that this kind of writing is helping me not only sort of get a steady sort of income, it is also helping me express myself in a more prolific manner, express myself every week rather than every 2 years.
Right.
It helps me out there. It helps me sort of and if you've noticed, even my reviews are very unconventional. I'm more a fan, I consider myself more of a writer who just happens to review films more than a film critic itself. So even in my reviews, there's a sort of a storytelling arc in most of my reviews and all, and that comes from my initial obsession with writing
Movies.
films, writing stories, writing short stories. For many years on my personal blog, I wrote short stories just to practice writing. So
Right.
that's how I started off, and I guess somewhere along the way, I figured that you can also tell stories when you write about stories.
Definitely. You are also the only film critic who I guess writes about short films on a constant basis.
Yes. The short film thing, I mean, due credit to Film Companion, because they proposed the idea when I joined them that, nobody is really reviewing short films. I think we should get into that space. And I was more than happy, because I've always been a big fan of short films most of my life, even back 10, 15 years ago when we used to make short films back in college and all. It was the first medium most of us sort of used to express ourselves.
Definitely.
So when I got a chance to professionally review short films, I took it up, and I was, and more than anything, short film reviewing sort of is a win-win for both sides, because it not only helps a lot of upcoming filmmakers find their voice and get a little more encouraged and know that their work is being appreciated and analyzed by professionals. It also helps me personally as a writer, because reviewing short films tends to I tend to look at short films in a different angle, in a different gaze. And the thing about short films is, I know people say it's only 5 or 10 minutes and kitna hi effort lagega short film review karne mein, but it's a different craft altogether. It's a different language of reviewing, and it helps me streamline my thoughts better. It trains me in the craft of feature film reviewing and series reviewing, which are longer formats of reviewing. But some of my short film reviews are also like the length of feature film reviews, like 800 or 900 or 1,000 words if it's a very good short film. And it helps me think on the fly better. It helps me sort of appreciate every, given the economical format of storytelling, it helps me appreciate why storytelling is the way it is, and helps me get into the nuances better. So for me personally, even though I have no reason to keep doing it, I still do it on my own. Once in every 2 weeks or once a week, I go looking for short films and do it, because it gives me a sense of satisfaction to be able to write about uh, an artist or a piece of art that's, that's very early on in the person's career, because then the person maybe later in life can also look back at that and and sort of understand that where he or she came from. And for me also, it's a great experience, because I get more messages and more requests by short filmmakers more than any other kind of artist out there, and I try to watch as many as possible. But obviously, given that I get like over 100 a month, I have to pick and choose. But when I do choose, I do it in a way that helps, that sort of helps both of us, and that sort of the films that I can really do justice to, the themes that I can really do justice to, I end up writing about. And it's not just time pass for me. For me, it's a very different area of reviewing, and I'm quite surprised not a lot of mainstream publications have a dedicated short film section, because now more than ever with streaming platforms, it's such a big avenue of art. And I know I've seen a few newspapers reviewing the big short films with stars in them or directed by big filmmakers, but the right way to do it is really like go deep into the roots. I've reviewed at least 50 student films over the last 3 or 4 years, and it's been a great experience, because it reminded me of my time. And I used to wonder if a big critic back then had maybe reviewed one of my short films, I would have been doing something else today.
Definitely. Like, I remember I had, like, once the first time I made my short film, I messaged you on Twitter, sir, please give a review, Kalena. And you liked it. I mean, that was, anyways, just a big deal. That was like a show of ki Rahul Desai from Film Companion liked my tweet and everything. Still, yeah, I understand. But you tell me, like, you are reviewing many student short films. How like, are they better, or like from a different, like, पहले का time से better है अभी?
I mean, see, the thing is, now people have no excuse to not make films. You can make films on your phone now. You can make films in your room in lockdown now. So you don't have an excuse. Like back in my time, 10, 15 years ago, we had an excuse. हमारे पास equipment नहीं था. We couldn't afford it. Independent filmmaking was still very new back then. And it could easily drive away, like, filmmakers who could not afford it. Now everyone can. So even the general quality, obviously the quantity has increased, which that a lot of bad films are also still coming out, like Bollywood, like any other medium. But you see the general quality of short films have obviously improved, because there is more freedom of expression. There are streaming platforms that encourage it. YouTube is such a big source of revenue for a lot of short filmmakers who make it big only by going viral nowadays. So I feel like people are using it smartly now. And obviously the general quality, but I do notice that short films, the student shorts that they end up writing about sometimes often tend to be the best films in that filmmaker's career, at least for the first 10 years, because it's a voice that's very unrestrained, and the filmmaker has still not learned his or her limits in envisioning things, in imagining things. So your first film is always going to be the rawest, the most raw version of you, and your most raw expression of how you understand the craft. A lot of filmmakers, if you ask them, they'll say the same thing. Even for me, that's why I try to pick up the first films of a lot of student filmmakers. So because I know I'm never going to get to see this version of them again. But if I review their short film again or their feature film down the line, there will be commercial restrictions. Their voice may have changed a bit. Their voice may have been diluted a bit. So yeah, so you have to be smart about, being able to, not only just improve on your own craft, but also sort of inform the environment out there.
Right. But now, I mean, when you see, like, many filmmakers have said ki we work independently just to not have the commercialization effect on us. And therefore, many people like me and many friends who are filmmakers, they have the similar thing that they want to do their own way. So just, anything else cannot affect their film.
Yeah, honestly, like, that's the reason most into filmmaking or storytelling, because that's our initial first vision of how we will go about our careers, about how we will tell stories to the people we want to tell stories to and the kind of stories we want to tell. That's a very idealistic way of looking at things. Once you now enter the business, you start realizing that इसमें तो commerce भी है, इसमें तो producer भी है, distributor भी है, सब कुछ है. So to find that balance is not easy. A lot of filmmakers fall by the wayside because they get so disillusioned by the people who are financing films. They get so disillusioned by the fact that their vision is not respected as much as a producer's vision. And I see so many independent filmmakers tend to be very, very bitter because of that. And because of that, their films are angrier and darker than ever before. I know it's a cliche, but it's true. A lot of the business in Bombay, the way people go about, the way the big production houses operate, they tend to make a lot of young, talented filmmakers disoriented. And that tends to show over their career. Some of them, get so consumed by the bitterness that they never come out of it. But some of them manage to channelize that bitterness in a particular direction, or they get known for making a particular realistic genre of cinema. But again, like not all of them get to make films their own way, and that's one thing you have to make peace with over time. Very few filmmakers on this globe, on this whole earth, get to make films the way they want to. Very few writers get to write books the way they want to also. It's very,
Definitely.
We do. Our first draft may be what we want, but then after that comes the external factors. So those who make peace with the balance and can actually find a way to not compromise their own integrity, their own vision, good for them, props for them.
Yeah.
And this is obviously always visible in the work they do also. You can instantly see, a trained eye like mine can instantly see where the filmmaker has compromised on his integrity, where the filmmaker is sold out, so to say. So, you can't trick us. We know it, and we know how tough it is. But the decision is of an artist to showcase their art, and that means it's always open to scrutiny. It's always open to public gaze. And our job is not to see how hard you work to get the film out there. Our job is to see how good the film is, or if the film works.
Definitely.
If we started rewarding films, or if we started reviewing films according to how many years of an artist's life it took to make it, or how much money they put into it of their own, or how they sold their house to sort of make the film, then we'll never give a negative review in our lives.
Definitely. Right. But also, I wanted to say the review thing. Like now, I see so many reviewers. Like every third person is a reviewer. Everyone has a blog. Everyone writes about the films they like, series they like. कभी effect आता है कि नहीं on your thing?
It's pretty overcrowded right now, and it's going to get more populated. I just consider myself fortunate that I started my writing or reviewing career around 2013 or 14 professionally,
Right.
when I started getting paid for it. And it was pretty late technically, because for the years before that, I was still figuring out what kind of writer I want to be. So when I started, social media wasn't as rampant as it was right now. So it was obviously a little bit easier to stand out if you were even half good at what you did. A lot of our older critics and our senior critics who are big today, who have millions and thousands of followers and who get read and watched even today, all started in the 90s and early 2000s. And back then, so there was no internet only, forget social media. So their personality, their impression from that era is carried on to this era, because a lot of generations only had like 4 or 5 names in their minds, and those names are still stuck. So it's up to people
Definitely.
like us, up to the younger generation to come and tell people that there is an entire generation of very talented writers and reviewers out there right now, and it's not just the old guard there right now. And even though there is like an absolute, there's almost an epidemic of everyone having their own opinion and having a Facebook status to communicate it, having a Twitter thread to communicate it. It's far more difficult to stand out now. So if you do actually stand out, that means you're actually good at what you do. Either that,
Right.
or you suddenly sold out in a way. It's like it's two extremes basically. Either you're really bad or you're really good. So you really have to, in either way, you have to really like work harder at your craft. It's like how OTTs have affected the theatrical experiences right now, because because OTTs have come now, filmmakers, big budget filmmakers, mainstream filmmakers have to work harder to get people to the theaters. It's the same for any other profession. For critics like us also, being known isn't enough. We have to keep getting better at our craft, because every 2 days, 100 new critics are born. It's another matter if they actually manage to go on and make it a career. Very few people actually aspire to become film critics. That's the brutal truth of things, because it is not affordable in a country like this or in a big city like this. You have to do several different things at a time. That's why you see a lot of journalists who double up as critics. I fortunately have had the privilege of being only an essayist, only a critic. I don't interview people because, I believe consciously it affects the way a person can review their films. So, for me, I stick only to writing about films rather than talking to filmmakers, or rather than, becoming an entertainment journalist. And, it's tough on the pocket. It's not a very rewarding profession financially, but if you want to sleep well at night, you have to, follow your
thing
voice,
which you like,
follow your passion. Yeah.
But you mentioned you have to stand out. But what should we like, because it's so crowded right now? How does someone stand out? Because everyone has great vocab right now.
Yeah.
If that's the thing.
Yeah. So no one actually writes or goes about their work aiming to stand out. If you actually go about your reviewing or your writing with this desperation to stand out, then it will show in your work. Then you will start being gimmicky in your writing. You will start writing like reviews in different formats. You will start writing in conversational formats. You will start being very snarky. You will start being very funny for the heck of it. And those gimmicks start to show in your writing if you try too hard to stand out. So it's a very fine balance. Like, if you just go about your work every day with great sincerity and with just the desire to learn more, to get better at what you do, because I believe Indian film criticism is still way behind a lot of other countries. Our standards are not very high. Most of us grew up idolizing Western critics, not Indian critics. We never had anyone to idolize here. Okay, other than Times of India brands, and other than brands, people were rarely known by their names. So the thing is, we have a long way to go. So, it's really up to us to sort of figure out a way to sort of, just further the art in general. Because, just because you're writing about an art form doesn't mean your own art isn't one, because you can easily be a critic and an artist at the same time. And a lot of people just look at film criticism as something as simple as an opinion, or
stars de do bas ho gaya,
or the stars, or achhi hai ya gandi hai, and that's it. Like, they don't want to read what a film critic is actually writing. And it's up to us to sort of bring in that culture. And now with so much technology at our disposal, I think it's a better time to put ourselves out there than ever before, because now digital platforms allow you to express yourself better. You don't have word limits like in newspapers, like in print. You can actually be a little lavish with your voice. You can actually afford to find your voice. If you're lucky enough to have a good editor who trusts you, you're allowed to do things. So I don't think there's an excuse saying that, we have to stand out. We have to try our best to stand out because those young people are coming up and their Facebook reviews are so popular, their Instagram reviews are so popular. Okay, we know that, but in the end, people will go to tried and tested voices who have over a period of time proved that they are consistent with not only their opinion giving, not only their critique and their analysis, but also their writing. The writing is not about vocabulary. Writing is about expressing yourself. I at one point made the mistake of thinking writing in big words, but it was never that. Writing is really about communicating your thoughts, expressing yourself through someone else's film. And if you can do that, and if you can tell your own story through reviews, I think it's, a battle won.
Right. Wow. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
Also, I noticed that you review superhero movies. Like, you review very less, or sometimes you just don't.
Yeah.
Why is that so?
That's a conscious decision, honestly. Like, look, every professional critic, from all over the world, they all have like their sore points, because we watch so many movies day in and day out, because it's required of us to watch all kinds of movies have our like, our blind spots in general. So, so I know a lot of fellow critics who don't like horror movies, and they just don't review horror films. I know others who don't like musicals, so they refuse to review it. They're saying that we just can't do justice to it because we never were interested in the history or culture of musicals. So why should we, just for the heck of it, review it? So if you're in a position to take a decision like that, I don't see why not. Because, honestly, I grew up at an films were still superhero comics first, and I still remember that the first big superhero film I watched in a theater was Spider-Man back in 2001 or 2, and with the Tobey Maguire one, and that was the beginning of an era for me, and I was so excited. I was like, okay, this is what superhero films can be like too, in an era of VFX, in an era of imagination. Filmmakers are thinking bigger now. But except for that, those couple of Spider-Mans and then the first Iron Man, Marvel took over, DC took over, it became a franchise. It just became such a global business. You can smell the business in these films now. It's not so much to cater to fans. I admire fans who are such superhero nerds and, religiously follow all of the 55 Marvel films that have been made. But, I don't have the emotional investment to do that, because for me, if you lose sight of sort of where the root of a particular mythology comes from, then there's no point in repeating yourself over and over again. So the films are like that. Even in our reviews, we'll start repeating ourselves again. And I personally believe there's no point anyways, sort of trying to review every single superhero film, because you're then just doing sort of fan service most of the time. You're reviewing it because it has a lot of fans, not because you're actually interested in it. And globally, a lot of people do that. It's going to get you numbers. The new Thor or the new Wonder Woman will, obviously, people will be dying to read different opinions. But I mean, I'm just not interested in it. I think the last superhero film I reviewed was Wonder Woman, in fact. And as it turns out, I actually liked that film. But I've not reviewed any of the silly Justice League films or the Avengers films after that, because I just lost track. I don't, I somehow have always had an aversion towards franchises that become too big for their, like, just too big for their own good. Like when it stops being films and starts becoming like an entire universe, that's when even I lose interest. Like after a point, I remember losing interest in the Harry Potter films also. I remember losing interest in so many other, like, I mean, I don't even think I was interested in the Lord of the Rings trilogy for a long time till I watched it way later in life. So I don't know. It's one of those personal sort of things. And I guess I don't see I get a lot of requests to review superhero films, but there's honestly, I'd be doing great. I mean, I'd be doing no justice to that particular aspect of movie watching, honestly.
I get it, yeah. So you agree with Scorsese?
Yeah, I agree with Scorsese. I mean, he said it the way I wanted him to say it also, like just dismissive as ever. And of course, critics can afford to say that, but when filmmakers say that, it's a totally different thing altogether. So yeah, I mean, I'm a purist at heart in that sense.
He could say it because he's Martin Scorsese.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone else could have said it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it became such a big deal. And I admire him for saying it, because it's not just his age or anything. He's coming from a space of what he's been seeing over the last 20 years. He's been seeing what we've been seeing, and he feels it all the more than we do, because his films are the enemy compared to that. His films are old school, purist, and he's still sticking to his roots most of the time. So obviously, he can get agitated by this, and I totally get where he comes from.
I also saw this Quentin Tarantino interview with Howard Stern, where he said that Hateful Eight was supposed to release at a big theater over there, and they had a deal, and Star Wars was supposed to play a week before that.
Yeah.
And just Disney thought that they want Star Wars to play for 2 more weeks at the same theater, but Tarantino had the deal with them. And when they said, I have to honor the contract with Tarantino, and they said, no, if you don't do it, we won't give you Star Wars. And it just didn't happen.
I'm not surprised. I think a lot of these filmmakers have gone through it. Like because a lot of filmmakers, like a lot of American filmmakers who've been around for a long time, like Tarantino, Scorsese, so many old school filmmakers have all experienced this wrath of like franchises. Like Star Wars is another thing I've never seen only because I've just lost interest for watching it. Like I was like, nahi, dekhna hi nahi hai, because it was bad enough in the 80s and 70s when people were going nuts about it. Abhi to with VFX and with like technology, so I do not want my mind to be so. I do not want my mind to explode with this abundant amount of information. So and I totally get like these filmmakers lose out because of that. You know, like genuinely original voices like Tarantino, like Scorsese. They've no matter how much of a legacy you have, you're bound to lose out financially. They are not exactly known for their films becoming super hits or anything. They are known for their voice. They are known for their art, and that's why they come from a different school of thinking, a different school of filmmaking, which is why I actually admire Christopher Nolan so much, because he combines both worlds in a very clever way. And you know,
sweet spot.
Yeah, it's a sweet spot. It's very, very difficult to make blockbusters out of such high concept ideas and such artistic sort of vision. And he's the only filmmaker who does that, and he's the only filmmaker who not only like big production houses will back, but even these cinephils who swear by Tarantino and Scorsese will also back a Nolan, because he knows how to do it, and he's found that sweet spot. I don't see a lot of other filmmakers who manage to do that, being both critically and commercially, you know, successful.
Right. But speaking of Nolan, what do you think of Dunkirk?
Dunkirk.
Like, I mean, did you find it even slightly like, this is why I have some arguments with my friends. Okay, some people say it's the greatest movie. It's amazing, whatever it is. And what I say is, it's like it must be amazing, but it's very boring.
I mean, I wouldn't say it was boring or anything. So I mean, I never have extreme opinions about Nolan. Even Nolan failing is still Nolan passing on a lower level technically. But you know, even Dunkirk, like Dunkirk for me was it was the most un-Nolan-like film. So a lot of us who sort of grown up watching his films, his imagination take form and different is on screen. Dunkirk was a very unusual film. So you know, even our reactions were a little polarized because of that. Like, for example, I really loved it when it came out, but over time, my affection for the film has sort of decreased. Like, it doesn't stand up to a lot of other Nolan films that, and you know, still props to him for taking like a real life historical and still managing to sort of infuse in it his weird like obsession with time and space. And you know, no other filmmaker would even attempt to do that. And you know, it may or may not have worked, but he still did give us a very different dimension of a war film, of the way we look at war films, because it's always been so conventional and so brutal that Nolan sort of made it into an art form. And sure, a lot of us got carried away when we watched it, but over time, if you look at Nolan's filmography, if you look at his legacy, I think Dunkirk won't figure in the top 3 or the top 4 Nolan films, because you know, he stands for originality. He stands for a lot of. He combines science and art in a way that a lot of us don't seem to appreciate it enough. And you know, some of my favorite Nolan films are where he dares to like challenge the perception of our world gaze, of the way we look at things. And like, my favorite Nolan film is Inception by like a mile, because I don't think I've ever seen a film like that in my life, where you know, where it totally changes the way you think, and the way you think about memories, the way you think about dreams, and to just hold the viewers till that last shot and then leaving them with that last shot. I think it's a work of genius, and no other filmmaker has ever managed to do that. So yeah, most of I love his originals, and that's why I'm very looking forward to like his Tenet, because for me it's sort of it looks like a mix of Inception and Interstellar, and you know, a lot of his best work, like Nolan's greatest hits sort of combination.
Right.
And I am always, you know, I'm a big like science nerd when it comes to a lot of sci-fi films, a lot of you know, very original concepts. So you know, I'm all for it.
Right. I had this one question though. Tell me, what is film critic thing? Like, is film reviewing movies, film appreciation and saying wrong stuff in it, or film criticism adding the right or correct stuff in it?
Yeah, like, I mean, so look, again, like film criticism, you cannot take in a literal sense that you have to criticize films. But I just call it like critique. Film critique means that you analyze a film. It could mean a bit of appreciation, it could mean a bit of criticism. But more than anything, it's actually looking at the way a filmmaker tries to make a film and whether he or she succeeded in doing that. And it's analyzing your feelings towards a film, analyzing what a film is trying to accomplish. So, is one way of labeling it, criticizing is one way of labeling it. It's also because you want to create courses like that, you want to create courses of thinking different professions in your head. But honestly, film criticism technically is just critiquing an idea, critiquing a movie, critiquing a person. It's judging a person on a very, very informed level. So for me, that's about it. It's basically a balance of both, and I don't think there's one particular label that can describe what those of us who do it seriously. And and for me, it's a combination of so many different arts, of thinking, of writing, of creating. And I hope more people sort of look at it that way, rather than only thinking that you need to be a great film nut or a great cinephile to be a film critic, or you need to be a very honest and brutal critic at the same time. No, it needs to be a combination of several factors that can't really be named or tagged at this moment. And I believe like film criticism is the name of the profession, but there's far more depth to it than people would like to believe.
Right. I understand. Okay, so what on this topic? I want to ask you this: like, why do you think good films don't work over here? Like, I had the discussion with Satyanshu sir, who recently directed Chintu Ka Birthday, and he said that India won't grow much because good films are not coming in at the pace that it should. Like, but I was thinking that why do you think like films like Tamasha, Jagga Jasoos, this Sonjeriya, Mard Ko Dard Nahi Hota, some of my favorite films. Like, why do you think they do not work much?
Yeah, I mean, I believe like we as a film viewing culture in general associate the concept of entertainment with film watching a lot. Like, it's still not changed. It's not changed. We are so proud of Bollywood films and song and dance routines and heightened language and music and everything that we are so caught up in being so proud of our filmmaking culture that we tend to overlook a lot of different dimensions or different genres of different styles of filmmaking. Because of that, as a result, we tend to be suspicious of something new. We fear what we don't understand. And something like Jagga Jasoos, which is technically like a sort of a Broadway style, a Broadway style musical on screen, bursting with imagination and bursting with like colorful and vivid images. It's difficult for a lot of us to accept, because we go in thinking that Bollywood is already a musical medium, and why are they already making a musical into a musical? So we don't know how to accept something new like that. We don't know how to accept like something like a Sonchediya, Tamasha, because they all bring something new, something daring to the table. They bring they try to, and I won't attribute it to be something as simple as it's either a good film or a bad film, because for a lot of people Tamasha was a bad film. For a lot of people Jagga Jasoos was also a bad film. I just feel like anything new, anything novel, anything risky or daring, we tend to be suspicious of. We tend to dismiss before we even give it a chance, and that shows in the box office collections, especially in a country like this where a population gets swayed by a certain rhetoric so easily. It's very easy to dismiss a film. If you can dismiss an entire political ideology or an entire party, then what are films compared to that? So I feel like I mean, the good films are being made. A lot of filmmakers are still taking a chance, are still trying to come up with their own versions of cinema, with their own voices. But it's up to us. It's up to us as an audience, as a viewership, to sort of introduce the kind of discourse that helps us understand that films are not only about entertainment. They're not only about going on a Saturday with your family and enjoying yourself with a bucket of popcorn. There has to be more to that. You don't only escape into films. You also go so that, films can reflect a version of you, so that you can actually confront yourself. And films like Sonchidia do that. Films like so many other great films, the best of films do that. They make you also like sort of face a version of yourself that you didn't face, and they make you uncomfortable with yourself. And I think that's a different kind of entertainment. That's a different kind of awakening. And a lot of people don't, like a lot of Indians in general, aren't used to that. They aren't used to seeing the mirror all the time. So they dismiss a lot of films that turn out to be very good film, good, like well-crafted films, or by very brave filmmakers. So yeah, there's obviously no one single answer to that, but it's it's going to get more and more complicated with OTT platforms, and with so much more opportunity out there. It's going to get far more complicated, and I think we'll have a clearer answer to this maybe in 5 years or so.
Right. But also I was thinking about this because I'm also in film school, right?
Yeah.
So many people, because in third year, what all of us have to do is make a film or be a part of a film. So the thing is, but I was thinking that due to the OTT stepping up in a meteoric way right now due to pandemic, because theaters are closed, every big film is trying to come on OTT.
Yeah.
And if the greatest have come into the ring, again the similar thing might happen, that हमारी film पहुंचने में थोड़ा सा time लग जाएगा.
Yeah. That's a good observation, because I believe it's always been heading in this direction. There's a pandemic has accelerated this direction. Like the OTT space is also populated with Bollywood people, Bollywood producers, Dharma, and so many other big production houses have now jumped into the Netflix race also. And all of them are basically, it's become like a mini Bollywood, but in everyone's homes. And it was bound to, because OTT is growing faster than ever before, so it was always bound to the same. It was bound to reflect the same ecosystem it came from, and it was already there. The pandemic is going to only accelerate it. Like now, all the big films, as you said, you see an Akshay Kumar film and an Ajay Devgan film now slated to release on OTT platforms. So it is obviously going to get more difficult for a lot of independent or a lot of other different filmmakers to get their films accepted by OTT platforms, because now when OTT platforms start seeing the numbers that an Akshay Kumar film gets on their platform, they'll get spoiled and they'll be like, why should we run your film when we can easily get our numbers? So I'm hoping simple economics will deter them at some point, because they can't keep paying an Akshay Kumar or an Ajay Devgan or those producers 100 crores to buy their films, or 150 crores to buy their films. So at some point, economics will play its part, because Netflix won't pay so many filmmakers for acquiring their films as much, and a lot of sleeper hits over the last 2 or 3 years on Amazon, especially Amazon does some great Indian content. So a lot of them have not always featured big names. So at some point they'll also realize that we probably invest lesser into these shows, and they still get us the numbers. And is the money we are pumping into an Akshay Kumar film worth it? Into buying an Akshay Kumar or Ajay Devgan film worth it? So it's up to them over time, and I just hope it doesn't become like another Bollywood. Otherwise, what is the
Point of
difference?
it.
I mean, even in the West, it's more or less the same thing. Netflix makes a lot of trash at the same time, even though they make a lot of great other non-fiction documentaries and a lot of series. They make a lot of trash on the side. Michael Bay is now making films for Netflix. So it's everywhere. But it comes down to how the OTT platforms can sustain it now.
I think so. It'll be something like, we can take a student or an indie film, but we won't promote it. The marketing budget won't be as much as a normal film gets.
Could be. I mean, in general, also they don't market a lot of series or films anyway. It's mostly word of mouth, or it's mostly good reviews that sustain a good series or a good film.
There was this film by Jungle. Jungle was the name, by Shlok Sharma. Yeah,
I think
no one even knew of it.
Huh.
Sorry?
Was it Zoo?
Sorry, Zoo. Yeah, Zoo.
Yeah, so
I'm
it was
sorry.
shot on an iPhone and all. Yeah, I know.
iPhone
Again,
6.
it wasn't marketed. Nobody knew about it. But at some point, OTT platforms also cater to a very serious movie-going culture at the same time. Not just our families and our older people. They are only coming into the scene now. They'll start buying Hotstar subscriptions now that they know that all these films are going to come out. But we have
Right.
always been down. So it's up to us to sort of spread that kind of culture of consuming both kinds of cinema, not just limiting ourselves to one particular kind of filmmaking.
Right. But what are you watching these days? Like, are you watching any show?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to keep watching stuff on that. Very
Review.
rarely do we get to watch stuff that we don't have to review or don't have to write about. So I mean, I do tend on the weekends to like binge watch a particular series on Netflix or Amazon, depending on what I missed over the last couple of years. Like only right now I'm catching up on Schitt's Creek, which I released in 2015, and it's in its like 4 or 5 seasons down, and only now I've started watching it. So I watched Ozark the same way a couple of weeks ago. I finished
Nice.
all seasons in like 4 days or something. So once for me it's great. Like it's just catching up with what the world has been up to. Has been like that's the best part of being in lockdown and being privileged enough to be able to like continue watching stuff, even though new stuff isn't necessarily releasing in cinemas. A lot of stuff is coming out. I'm more busier than ever right now. Like every week at least 3 or 4 reviews just have to be done.
Right. What do you think of Chintu Ka Birthday?
Yeah, I really liked Chintu Ka Birthday. It was one of the rare films while I was watching it, I wasn't really liking it too much. But after it got over, I thought about it, and often it happens to a lot of critics and a lot of people who review films for a living, that when they are writing their review, suddenly the film starts making sense in their head. Suddenly their impression of a film changes. So you should never ask a critic what he thinks of a film when he exits a theater. Only
Right.
after writing the review, while wrestling with your thoughts, while trying to figure out what the film was trying to say, do you realize whether the film worked for you or not. And Chintu Ka Birthday actually worked for me when I was writing about the film more than when I was watching it. When I was watching it, I was not very invested in it, but suddenly it made sense. So I kind of liked it overall, and I thought it was a very different kind of chamber drama with some terrific actors, which really worked for them. Like I'm not a big fan of how Vinay Pathak does the same thing in every film, but in this film it worked for me more than most. So yeah.
I have to say this. One of my friend is a very big fan of yours. So he actually helped me prep for this podcast. But he asked this question: when can we see you writing about Wong Kar-wai movies in your columns?
Well, for that, hopefully my columns continue, because you never know these days. Every newspaper, every publication is sort of just cost cutting. So even if it's not in the form of columns, I will write about Wong Kar-wai very soon, because I personally caught on to Wong Kar-wai 5 or 10 years later than I should have. And when I did, I really caught on to the way he looks, the way just the way he designs his films. The colors that I've seen in his films, I've not seen in any kind of Asian cinema. And, given that, and it taught me so much about imagination and how imagination can sort of inform reality in a way without really suspending disbelief. And for me, that's a great achievement. And Wong Kar-wai is one of my personal heroes for the way he merges music with his envisioning of a particular story or a film. So hopefully I will at some point, when I get a window to revisit all his films again. I definitely want to, because in my columns I do tend to revisit a lot of previous films of previous filmmakers, and that's a great privilege, and it helps me also understand myself so much better. So hopefully I'll come to Wong Kar-wai very soon, because I've gone step by step through a lot of filmmakers, a lot of films, and In the Mood for Love is not very far away now.
Right. Okay. On that note, we'll end this. Thank you so much for doing this again.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks a lot. It was nice being here, Keval.
Oh, thank you so much. See you soon.